Picture this. February 2022. You're a trucker in Ottawa. You've been protesting peacefully for 3 weeks. Your bank account holds $47,000, life savings, mortgage fund, everything. You wake up, check your phone, and the balance reads 0. Not overdrawn, frozen, no court order, no warning, just gone. Your crime? The government decided your political opinion was inconvenient. Here's what the Canadian court ruled 2 years later, after your bills defaulted, after your credit imploded, after the damage was done, unreasonable and unconstitutional. But by then, the lesson was taught. Digital money can vanish with a keystroke. This isn't fiction. This was Canada, February 2022, and it's the blueprint for what 134 countries are building right now. Here's the thing that keeps me up at night. We're standing at a fork where the future of money gets decided, and most people don't even know the road splits. On one side, central banks are building what they call digital currency innovation. On the other, they're architecting the most comprehensive financial surveillance system in human history. Same technology, different programming. And the choice made in the next 36 months determines whether you can still buy bread without permission in 2030. 3 competing systems, 3 completely different answers to who controls your money. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, where governments control every transaction. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, where code replaces central authority. Physical gold, where you hold it and no one can program it, freeze it, or track it. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what programmable money means, why the general manager of the Bank for International Settlement said CBDCs give central banks absolute control, and why 98.5% of Nigerians refuse to use their government's digital currency even during cash shortage riots. Let me show you the architecture of the trap before it closes. Number 1, the admission they're not even hiding. Agustin Carstens, General Manager of the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank for central banks. October 2020, speaking at an IMF event. Here's what he said, on camera. With cash, we don't know who is using a $100 bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and also we will have the technology to enforce that. Not influence, not regulate. Absolute control. Let that sink in. The man coordinating global central bank digital currency development just told you, with cash, they can't see. With CBDCs, they can see everything and control everything. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is the architect explaining the blueprint. Here's the brutal math. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told Congress the same thing in 2019, that a CBDC could conceivably require the Federal Reserve to keep a running record of all payment data. Translation, they know when you bought gas, where you bought groceries, who you sent money to, what you spent it on. Total financial visibility. Permanent record. Number 2 is the international coordination you're not supposed to notice. Project M-Bridge. If you haven't heard of it, that's intentional. It's the Bank for International Settlements cross-border CBDC platform, launched with China, Thailand, UAE, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia joining in 2024. Over 30 central banks now observing, including the European Central Bank and Reserve Bank of India. The official story? Faster cross-border payments, lower transaction costs, more efficient settlements. Here's the kicker. In October 2024, evidence emerged that firms in Xinjiang were using M-Bridge to circumvent US sanctions. Chinese regulators had explicitly directed banks to use the platform. And the BIS response? They handed day-to-day management to the participating central banks and stepped back. No more direct oversight. This is the infrastructure for a parallel financial system where transactions bypass SWIFT, bypass US sanctions enforcement, bypass the existing monetary order, and it's operational, not theoretical, not 5 years away. Running transactions with real value right now. Number 3, the feature they're programming into the money itself. China tested digital yuan with an expiration date, not the wallet, not the account, the currency itself. They distributed consumption vouchers during COVID that vanished if you didn't spend them within a specific time frame. The European Data Protection Supervisor documented this risk explicitly. Once programmable money exists, governments can restrict spending by category, geography, individual status, or time window. Money that only works for groceries, not fuel. Money that expires in 30 days so you can't save. Money geofenced so you can't spend it outside designated zones. Money that checks your social credit score before allowing the transaction. Here's what gold critics miss. This isn't about improving monetary policy. This is about converting money from a tool you control into an enforcement mechanism the state operates. And the infrastructure once built never gets less intrusive. It only expands. Number 4 is the cautionary tale they're trying to bury. Nigeria launched the eNaira in October 2021. Government mandate, central bank incentives, massive promotional campaign. They positioned it as financial inclusion for a nation where most transactions were cash-based. 1 year later, 98.5% of activated eNaira wallets had never been used. Not once. 0 transactions. By late 2022, only 0.5% of Nigerians were actively using it. Total transaction volume, 4 billion naira. That's 9.3 million USD in a nation of over 200 million people for an entire year. The central bank got desperate. They announced restrictions on cash withdrawals, forcing adoption by choking supply. The response wasn't compliance, it was riots. Violent protests erupted across major cities. People chose chaos over the digital currency their government mandated. Here's the lesson that terrifies central bankers. Even when you make alternatives scarce, populations will accept severe disruption rather than adopt systems they don't trust. Nigerians use black market cash, turned to crypto despite regulatory ambiguity, relied on informal value transfer, anything but the surveilled digital system. The eNaira remains operational, but it's a dead system walking. Let me take you back to February 2022. Canadian truckers protesting vaccine mandates, peaceful convoy, 3 weeks of demonstrations. Prime Minister Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act, not to arrest them, to freeze their bank accounts. No court orders, no due process. Administrative authority, instantaneous. Bank accounts frozen. Crypto wallets frozen through exchanges. Crowdfunding platforms shut down. Anyone who donated had their financial access severed. A Canadian appeals court later ruled it violated constitutional rights. Unreasonable was the exact term. But that ruling came after the damage, after bills defaulted, after lives were disrupted, after the precedent was set. Here's the thing. This happened in a democratic nation with constitutional protections using existing financial infrastructure. It required coordination between government, banks, and payment processors. It took time. It left evidence. With a CBDC, that process becomes instantaneous. No coordination needed, no bank compliance required. The central bank programs the restriction directly into the currency. Your money stops working. Not frozen, rejected at the transaction level. And here's what keeps me up at night. If they did it with the clunky existing system, what happens when they control the money itself? Here's what most people missed while focused on other headlines. The Biden administration coordinated a regulatory campaign to debank the cryptocurrency industry. They called it supervision. The House Financial Services Committee investigation called it a coordinated attack on the digital asset ecosystem, not through legislation, through regulatory pressure. The Federal Reserve issued supervisory letters making crypto-related banking so burdensome that banks abandoned the sector. The OCC required pre-approval for any crypto activity. The FDIC sent letters to regional offices directing banks to pause crypto services. Silvergate Bank and Signature Bank, the primary banking infrastructure for crypto transactions, faced coordinated scrutiny until they failed. Other banks seeking to serve crypto firms discovered master account access systematically denied. This is regulatory authority weaponized to eliminate an industry without congressional authorization. And it worked. Now imagine that same authority embedded directly into programmable money. No need to pressure banks. Just program the currency to reject transactions they don't like. That's the CBDC endgame. Bitcoin emerged from the 2008 financial crisis as a response to exactly this problem. Its pseudonymous creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, designed it to eliminate the need for trusted third parties. No central authority who can print more. No government that can freeze accounts. No bank that can censor transactions. Here's the architecture. A distributed ledger maintained by thousands of independent computers. Consensus through proof of work. A hard-coded maximum supply of 21 million coins that cannot be changed without majority network agreement. which participants have economic incentive to resist because changes would debase their holdings. The result? Permissionless money. Anyone with internet access can join the network, send value, receive value, hold value, without requesting permission from any authority. But here's what Bitcoin advocates often don't tell you. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, not anonymous. Every transaction is recorded on a public blockchain. Blockchain analysis firms have developed sophisticated techniques for linking addresses to real identities, especially when those addresses interact with regulated exchanges requiring KYC data. So Bitcoin is far more traceable than cash, far more traceable than physical gold. Law enforcement can follow the money across the network, but, and this is critical, Bitcoin remains vastly more resistant to seizure than bank accounts. Holdings can be stored offline, memorized as seed phrases, hidden in ways that make them physically uncensorable absent coercion. For many users, that trade-off works. Pseudonymity plus censorship resistance beats complete surveillance with freeze capability. Here's the brutal math. The Canadian truckers who held Bitcoin in self-custody couldn't have their funds frozen. The ones who left it on exchanges, where KYC data existed, had those accounts frozen just like bank accounts. Self-custody. That's the difference between owning Bitcoin and having exposure to Bitcoin. Which brings us to the asset that operates entirely outside digital infrastructure. Physical gold, held in your possession. No digital record, no network required, no counterparty risk. When Weimar Germany's currency collapsed, you could buy the most expensive house in Berlin for a few ounces of gold. When Venezuela's Bolivar disintegrated, people shaved bits of gold to buy food and fuel. When Lebanon's banking system froze deposits in 2019, trapping citizens' life savings, physical gold and US cash were the only stores of value that still functioned. Gold doesn't need electricity, doesn't need internet, doesn't need institutional solvency. Its value derives from material scarcity and 5,000 years of human acceptance as money. Here's what's counterintuitive. The OMFIF analysis of CBDCs concluded that central bank adoption of digital currencies might actually increase demand for physical gold. Why? Because CBDCs designed with holding limits, negative interest rates, or programmable restrictions create rational incentive to shift wealth toward assets that lack those constraints. If your government announces the digital dollar has a $3,000 holding limit per person, as the European Central Bank considered for the digital euro, you have immediate incentive to convert excess savings to assets without limits. Gold, silver, real estate, anything they can't program or expiration date. But physical gold comes with costs, storage, insurance, liquidity challenges when you need to convert to currency for daily transactions. Transaction spreads when buying and selling. For long-term wealth preservation and systemic risk hedging, those costs are worth it. For routine payments, they're prohibitive, which is why the answer isn't choosing one system. It's understanding that each serves different purposes. So where are we seeing these patterns play out right now? Nigeria, Stage 5 complete. CBDC launched, population rejected it, system effectively dead despite remaining technically operational. China, Stage 4 advanced. Digital yuan operational with programmable features being tested, integration with broader social credit infrastructure documented. Europe, Stage 3 preparation. Digital euro development with privacy protections, but also holding limits and KYC requirements at intermediary level. And the elephant in the room, the United States. Executive Order 14067, March 2022. Biden administration directive for developing a US digital dollar. Federal agencies directed to coordinate research and development. The US House of Representatives passed the CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act in May 2024, prohibiting the Federal Reserve from issuing a CBDC directly to individuals without explicit congressional authorization. Representative Tom Emmer reintroduced similar legislation in March 2025. The political fight is happening right now, and the outcome determines whether Americans can still transact privately in 5 years. Here's the brutal reality. If Project Enbridge scales, if the digital euro launches, if China's digital yuan becomes the dominant payment rail in Asia, the US will face enormous pressure to compete with its own CBDC. National security justification, financial competitiveness argument, sanctions enforcement capability. And once the infrastructure exists, the temptation to use it for surveillance and control becomes overwhelming. Not because evil people run government, because the capability once built gets used. Always. Every time. Throughout history. The 5 systems that offer different risk profiles. Number 1. Physical precious metals, gold and silver held in your possession. Immune to digital surveillance, freeze-proof, no counterparty risk. Cost, storage burden, liquidity friction. Number 2. Self-custody, Bitcoin, censorship-resistant, permissionless hard supply cap. Cost, pseudonymous, not anonymous. Requires technical competence, regulatory uncertainty. Number 3. Productive assets with real utility, agricultural land, water rights, businesses that produce essentials people need regardless of currency stability. Cost, illiquidity, management burden, confiscation risk. Number 4. Skills and tools, knowledge that maintains value when systems break, how to grow food, purify water, repair equipment, provide medical care. Cost, time investment, can't be stored or sold. Number 5. Community and relationships, networks of people who can barter, trade and cooperate when formal systems fail. Cost, requires trust building before crisis hits. Notice what's missing from that list: foreign fiat currencies. Because here's what the audience commenting on these videos already understands. When the Western currencies collapse, they collapse together. This isn't Weimar, where you fled to dollars. This is 2026, where every major currency is fiat, every central bank is coordinating policy, and every system is interconnected through dollar dominance and swift integration. The Swiss franc might be last. The Singapore dollar might be more disciplined. But when confidence breaks, the cascade is synchronized. So the lesson: diversify across the 5 categories. Use CBDCs for routine transactions where convenience outweighs privacy concerns. Hold self-custody crypto for cross-border transactions and censorship resistance. Hold physical metals for long-duration wealth preservation outside all digital infrastructure. Invest in productive assets that generate essentials. Build skills that remain valuable when systems break. Cultivate community before you need it. The question isn't if digital currencies proliferate, they're already here. The question is whether they're designed with privacy protections and limited programmability, or whether they become comprehensive surveillance apparatus. And that outcome depends on whether populations understand what's at stake before the systems achieve scale and institutional entrenchment. If you're realizing that the next 5 years will determine whether you can still buy bread without government approval, hit that subscribe button. This is the independent financial historian. I show you the blueprints before they're built, and the autopsies after they collapse. It's free, unlike financial privacy in a system designed to monitor every transaction. Drop a helicopter emoji in the comments if you're already diversifying out of pure digital systems, and tell me what you want me to investigate next. I read every single one. The only question is whether you'll see the trap before it closes, or whether you'll be standing there wondering why your money stopped working when you tried to buy groceries. The infrastructure is being built right now. In Switzerland at the BIS, in Brussels at the ECB, in Beijing with the digital yuan, in Washington through executive orders and Federal Reserve research. The Canadian truckers learned the lesson. Digital money can be weaponized with a keystroke. The Nigerians learned the lesson. Populations will choose chaos over surveilled systems they don't trust. The question is whether you'll learn the lesson before your bank balance reads 0, and there's no court that can unfreeze it fast enough to save your mortgage. Now go diversify before you're forced to.